Hello, it's great to have you join us. Here's what's happening. An escalating trade war between China and the U.S.
There will be 104% tariffs going into effect.
And the stock market survived global volatility.
If you want us to stay in there fighting for you and your family, you got to vote for us.
Losing ground as the gap closes between the front runners.
I was like, what is happening?
Plus, blindsided by a blast of wintry weather.
CTV National News with Sandy Ronaldo.
Canada confirmed today that countermeasures against the U.S. at 25% tariff on auto imports goes into effect at 12:01 a.m. And Donald Trump is standing firm on global reciprocal tariffs, which hit the same time. Dozens of U.S. trading partners like Japan and South Korea have called the U.S. president to try to negotiate trade deals. The global markets were up and down again today as a result of the uncertainty. CTV's John Venavalle-Rao is on this file. And John, how did the day play out?
Well, Sandy, I mean, the market started out strong with a huge gain for stocks, but as the day wore on, the reality of the tariff situation seemed to sink back in again. At the opening bell, stocks rose sharply after a savage three-day sell-off that saw some investors this morning bet the worst might be over.
Front and center this hour, the rebound in stocks. S&P looking for its first positive day in 4.
And with America's Treasury Secretary saying nearly 70 countries have approached the U.S. to talk tariffs and make deals, the market seemed to respond positively. The Dow initially up 1,300 points.
The news that they're talking with South Korea, the news that they're talking with Japan, the news that they're talking with Taiwan is helping to calm the jittery nerves.
But it didn't last. By early afternoon, North American markets once again started to slide.
Put today's bounce into the entry of classic bear market bounce.
With investors stuck trying to guess what'll happen next on the eve of a potentially huge escalation in the U.S. trade war with China and tougher tariff penalties set to be imposed on dozens of countries.
I think the realities are setting in that this tariff war is not something that's going to resolve itself anytime soon.
Meanwhile, tensions are mounting between Trump's top trade advisor, who's been pushing for tariffs, Peter Navarro, and Elon Musk. On X, Musk calling Navarro a moron and dumber than a sack of bricks. A growing number of influential voices on Wall Street have been warning about a potential recession if the trade war escalates. And as for the early upswing in stocks,
we have these relief rallies along the way, but it's part of a broader trend where the market's going to continue to drop until it can find its footing. And the footing is really around the clarity that we need to have about these tariffs.
in the end, the main stock index here in Toronto lost about 1.5% of its value. It was the same for the S&P 500. It was down about 300 points. The NASDAQ, it was down about 2%. So another disappointing day for investors. Sandy.
Okay, John, thank you. We want to talk a bit more about that escalation of the trade war between the United States and China, the world's two top economies. China accusing the U.S. of bullying and blackmail. CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbon is with us again today. And Joy, we're talking about a really nasty trade war. So walk us through what's at stake.
Sandy, the Chinese aren't backing down. The Chinese ministry said pressure, threats, and blackmail, it's not the way you deal with China. That's in response to President Trump's threats of additional tariffs. Now, Trump posted on Truth Social today he's waiting for China to call him to make a deal. But China doesn't seem to be picking up the phone anytime soon, calling Trump's tariffs economic bullying, and China vows to fight to the end. The White House confirming that as of midnight tonight, the Trump administration will hit China hard with all those tariffs going on U.S. laptops, smartphones, clothing, shoes, toys, and the list goes on. Here's what the White House press secretary had to say.
The president about this, and he believes that China wants to make a deal with the United States. He believes China has to make a deal with the United States. It was a mistake for China to retaliate. The president, when America is punched, he punches back harder. That's why there will be 104% tariffs going into effect on China tonight at midnight. But the president believes that she and China want to make a deal. They just don't know how to get that started. And the president also wanted me to tell all of you that if China reaches out to make a deal, he'll be incredibly gracious, but he's going to do what's best for the American people.
Okay, so talk to us about the confusion, Joy. Donald Trump standing firm, some members of administration signaling open to negotiations, as we just heard. Is there an off-ramp?
You know, a lot of mixed messages right now. The president was signing an executive order to lift regulations on coal mining and invest in the next generation of coal technology. He defended his tariff policy, saying sometimes you got to mix it up a little bit. Now, the White House claims that some 70 countries have called, saying the phones are ringing off the hook. Regardless, Trump's reciprocal tariffs are going to go into effect. There will be no pause, and any deals will be negotiated country by country. Here's what the president said at that coal mining event.
Tariffs, we're taking in almost $2 billion a day in tariffs, $2 billion a day, and we're doing very well. And we're doing very well in making, I call them tailored deals, not off the rack. These are tailored, highly tailored deals. Right now, Japan is flying here to make a deal.
The president did not acknowledge the deep losses on Wall Street, Sandy, and in spite of all those mixed messages coming from this White House, they seem to be signaling to nations around the world, let's make a deal. Sandy?
All right, there you go. Okay, Joy, thank you. Now, Donald Trump's policies loom large over Canada's federal election campaign, and today new poll numbers show the Conservatives are closing the gap on the Liberals with less than 3 weeks to go. The Nanos research poll shows the Liberals have fallen 3 points to 42.7%, while the Conservatives have risen 3 to 38.1%. The NDP dropped slightly to 8.1%. On the question of preferred prime minister, the same trend is happening. Mark Carney still leads with 48.6%, but Pierre Poilievre has moved up to 33.3%. All three leaders were hard at work on the campaign trail in the West. Pierre Poilievre started the day in Edmonton, while Mark Carney had a few stops in British Columbia and will end in Calgary. Jagmeet Singh campaigned in BC's Lower Mainland. All right, so let's get into some of today's policy announcements, starting with Pierre Poilievre's pledge to get rid of offshore tax loopholes. CTV's Jeremy Sharon is with the Conservatives. Hi, Jeremy. What's the plan?
Sandy, it's a plan to go after big earners using tax loopholes to save money. Pierre Poilievre says he'll stop them from hiding their money abroad and ensure they're paying their fair share. Inside an Edmonton auto shop, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre took aim at Mark Carney today with a pitch to close offshore tax loopholes.
Mark Carney, like all Liberals, is a high-tax hypocrite, making you pay more while he dodges his bill.
The Conservatives have criticized Carney for using offshore tax havens during his time as chair of Brookfield Asset Management. CTV News previously reported Brookfield registered several of its entities in Bermuda, a country that has no corporate income tax. Asked today whether a Liberal government would condemn the use of tax havens, Carney had this to say.
What's important is that we have an effective tax system, and that companies, every company, follows the rules of those tax to not just the letter but the spirit of those regulations.
Carney has maintained he always followed the rules. Now Poilievre's Conservatives are pitching changing them.
We will target tax havens, expose offshore fortunes, and bring the money home. All of this with the goal of reducing the tax burden on the people in this country.
That would include, under a Conservative government, redirecting CRA resources away from small businesses and toward efforts to close tax haven loopholes. The NDP has also proposed policies to close tax loopholes and end agreements with countries like Bermuda. It all comes on the heels of the Conservatives' biggest rally yet in Edmonton Monday night, where Poilievre was endorsed by former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, who was the one to appoint Mark Carney as Governor of the Bank of Canada.
I am the only person who can say that both of the men running to be Prime Minister once worked for me. And in that regard, my choice, without hesitation, without equivocation, without a shadow of a doubt, is Pierre Poilievre.
Nonprofit group Canadians for Tax Fairness estimates the Canadian government loses more than $40 billion a year to tax loopholes. Between 10 and 25 billion of that is international tax dodging. Sandy?
Okay, Jeremy Sharon. About the NDP and Liberals set their sights on housing again today. Mark Carney adding to promises the Liberals will build their way out of the crisis. CTV's Abigail Beeman is with the Liberal campaign. And Abigail, what are the details of the promise?
Sandy, Mark Carney picked a sustainable home building plan to highlight previously announced Liberal promises on housing, looking to build more with Canadian lumber to lessen reliance on the United States.
Our goal is to double the pace of housing construction to almost 500,000 new homes every single year. Homes you can afford to buy. Homes that are more sustainable.
The Liberals are promising to double residential construction to nearly 500,000 homes a year over the next decade and provide $25 billion in financing for prefabricated home builders like this plant in BC so they can scale up production. This company says only about 20% of the wood you see here for prefabricated homes is Canadian. Due to cost and quality, most is from Europe. But the president says now is the moment to make it 100% Canadian.
It could be done relatively fast. I think we are pretty ready to do it. We already have quite a lot of suppliers that are competitive.
Also in BC, New Democrats were focused on housing, promising a permanent ban on foreign home buyers in an effort to stop skyrocketing home prices and strengthen rules against house flipping.
Homes in Canada should be for you and your family, not for rich investors to get richer.
Meanwhile, Conservatives have also made housing a priority in the campaign. The biggest promise is to cut GST on new homes under $1.3 million. And no coincidence, the Liberals focused on the connection between housing and lumber here in BC with 50,000 forestry workers in the province. Sandy?
Abigail, thank you. Now, as we saw from Nano's polling, support for the NDP is down. The leader campaigning in Vancouver was asked about the party's poor showing. CTV senior political correspondent Mike LeCouture is traveling with Jagmeet Singh. Hi, Mike.
Well, Sandy, with NDP polling numbers matching this dreary BC weather, party officials are trying to push back, saying what they're hearing on the doorstep is not reflective of what we're seeing in those polls. Now, there are also some reports that NDP leader Jagmeet Singh could be in danger of losing his own seat in Burnaby Central, but he insists he will win it.
Absolutely. I'm confident that I'll be able to serve the people of Burnaby Central.
However, the most recent polling from Nano's research shows the NDP have hit a 25-year low when it comes to support in this country. The latest number has them at a distant third place with just 8% of support. The numbers that won't be helped by the news of former New Democrat MP who is supporting Liberals in their bids to get re-elected. Murray Rankin had publicly said he's endorsing Jonathan Wilkinson and Talib Noor Mohammed as two people who can reach across party lines. How much does that bother you?
Well, I think it's wrong to suggest that in this time that we need less New Democrats. We need more New Democrats. You know, the things that we're proud of, the things that made our lives better were because New Democrats were there.
Despite having half of their current caucus from this province, the NDP isn't planning any big supporter rallies with Singh while he's here this time. One campaign official telling us that rallies pull people off the doorsteps, and right now they want to concentrate on the ground game. Sandy?
All right, Mike. Let's bring in CTV's chief political correspondent, Vashi Kapellas. Vashi, talk to us about the flagging NDP and what it means to a horse race at this point between the Conservatives and Liberals.
Yeah, it's an especially significant storyline throughout the first half of this campaign, and it has largely been, Sandy, to the benefit of the Liberals. Essentially, most of the Liberals' gains in public opinion polling has come at the expense of the NDP, not the Conservatives, who, yes, have come down from some of the highs that they were seeing last year, but still hold, depending on the poll, anywhere from 36 to more than 40% of popular opinion support. So It has been a big deal for this campaign. It is informing the switch for many voters to the Liberals, and certainly if it continues this way, could ultimately have a huge bearing on what happens April 28th.
Everybody talking about rallies, the NDP, the Conservatives, the Liberals. Pierre Poilievre today pointed to the size of his rallies as an indicator of his popularity. Even Mark Carney was drawn in. So can you judge a campaign, the success of a campaign, by the size of these gatherings?
Well, it's such a great question to raise, and certainly one that I've been grappling with over the past few weeks, because we do see public opinion polling heading in one direction, and certainly it has over the past few weeks toward the Liberals largely, right? Even if by a small margin at this point. And you try and reconcile that with the size of these crowds, which are significant, which I have not seen in the time I've been covering politics. And so you've got to try and think, like, is it going to create sort of a schism at some point, or will it come to bear in those public opinion polls? It's hard to know for sure. I think what we can say for sure is that the Conservative vote is a very committed and motivated one, and that is showing through in the size of these crowds. Whether it translates, though, on election day remains an open question.
All right, Vashi, thank you. Now, the Green Party unveiled a health care plan, and later co-leader Elizabeth May spoke out against proposed expansion plans for Toronto's downtown airport. And that city is where we find CTV's Rachel Aiello. Okay, Rachel, tell us more about what the Green Party is promising voters.
Hey, Sandy. Yeah, Green Party co-leader Elizabeth May brought her campaign to Vote Rich Ontario today in an effort to try to make waves for her party outside of the West Coast. First, talking about healthcare, that expansion, which they call the most ambitious plan of any party. And then here at Billy Bishop, raising concerns about an increase in air and climate pollution because of the proposal to have more jets coming in here. But, you know, Sandy, this is coming amid real questions in this election over whether all of these smaller parties could get squeezed out, as this is really shaping up to be a Liberal Conservative vote. So I put that directly to Elizabeth May. Take a listen.
We are speaking to all Canadians and saying, please broaden your horizons. It is not a country with a two-party system. We don't want a country with a two-party system. We see what that looks like south of the border. We have 5 parties currently in our parliament. Some are in real jeopardy in this election. The Greens are doing well in this election, and we hope to have more Greens elected than we've ever had before.
So, Sandy, Green Party leader, co-leader Elizabeth May saying clearly she is optimistic that the Greens aren't going to suffer the same fate as the other parties. But worth noting for everyone, right now, Nanos polling has the Green Party at 2.8% nationally. So a big jump for them to try to make up the gains that they would need to pick up seats, let alone hold the ones they currently have. Sandy?
All right, Rachel Aiello. And CTV National News will be right back. Don't go away. An April snow day brought a blast of winter to spring in Canada. Some communities in Ontario, Quebec, and Atlantic Canada were hit. Not typical weather, but also not unusual for this time of year. CTV Atlantic meteorologist Kaylin Mitchell starts us off with that wicked weather in the east.
Thank you, Sandy. Well, yes, we certainly have a bit of a sprinter situation going on across the country, a combination of some spring and winter-like weather. Let's begin with the winter-like weather first, and it has been some areas of snow for parts of Ontario, Quebec, and Atlantic Canada as a pair of low-pressure systems move through, and for some areas, including parts of the Nickel Belt region in Ontario, into western areas of Quebec and a few parts of Atlantic Canada, the snow has resulted in some accumulations over 10 centimeters, including 14 centimeters and around Ottawa International Airport and Halifax, with a separate low-pressure system moving up the eastern seaboard, picking up 12 centimeters of snow. And there's some more snow to come here as we make our way through this evening and tonight. Parts of the east of Quebec, areas of New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, parts of western Newfoundland, some additional snowfall amounts of 1 to 5 centimeters, pockets of 5 to 10. And that's followed tomorrow by some cooler spring temperatures across much of the east, whereas in the west, it's a different story. Rich in the jet stream and milder spring weather expected for parts of BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. Sandy.
Okay, Kaylin, thanks. Still ahead, the prince has his day in court. At least 44 people are dead and dozens more were injured after the collapse of a roof at a nightclub in the Dominican Republic. It happened at about 1 a.m. local time at a club in Santo Domingo. At least 300 people were inside at the time. Well, Prince Harry made a rare public appearance in Britain this morning at London's Royal Court of Justice. He's fighting changes to his security detail after stepping down from royal duties.
Morning, Harry. Are you going to visit your dad, Harry?
King Charles and wife Camilla are in Italy as Harry tries to overturn a decision to deprive him of personal police security while in Britain. Harry has previously said the safety of his children is at the heart of the case. And what started as a lucky owl sighting in Windsor, Ontario, has grown into a remarkable wildlife project. Retiree Chris Jacobson spotted an owl in his backyard 6 years ago. He mounted a camera to catch the nighttime action, and now he has 6 cameras and has some incredible moments. CTV National News continues in a moment. Near the banks of the Saguenay River in the heart of North America's aluminum-producing region sits Arvida, a settlement that's part of the city of Saguenay and in the spotlight because of Donald Trump's trade war. CTV's Geneviève Beauchemin went there to learn what's motivating voters ahead of this month's election.
The first bridge built of aluminum in the world crosses the Saguenay River. It's a powerful symbol of the roots of Arvida, once a company town built from a smelter.
It's beautiful.
Arvida is now a National Historic Site of Canada, with its 270 homes built for aluminum plant workers in just 135 days, and that was nearly a century ago. We stopped by Square Davis, named after the founder of the aluminum plant, Arthur Vining Davis. At the local coffee shop, we found Pierre Poilievre catching up on news. The retired teacher says he's concerned about the environment, but in the face of pressing concerns about tariffs and the economy, that has been swept aside. 2 doors down, Rémi Simard was picking up a bike he had repaired.
I like Canada. I crossed Canada in a bike.
Yeah. Long time ago?
In 2010.
2010, so coast to coast?
Coast to coast.
Wow.
It took 75 days, 7,500 kilometers, and everywhere the people was amazing.
He says he would like politicians on the campaign trail to talk more about the military.
We should have a stronger army. I thought that since many, many years, but now I think people with Trump, we know that we need a stronger army.
And many here are just trying to determine just how wide-ranging the impacts of those 25% tariffs will be in the long run.
A stone's throw from Davis Square, a church is being converted into a museum devoted to Arvida's history.
On va savoir tirer notre jeu de l'épingle là ici.
Director General Marianne Salès-Côté says she's confident Arvida will survive and thrive despite tariffs. After all, it has withstood other hardships over a century of history. Geneviève Beauchemin, CTV News, Saguenay, Quebec.
Thanks for sharing your time with us. I'm Sandy Ronaldo. Your local CTV News is coming up. See you tomorrow, we hope. Bye for now. Have a nice evening.